Thank you, Vlad. Thank you for that really nice introduction. And yes, there will be a Greek language quiz when I'm done. You have to go to American universities to learn these Greek words, right? This is what we find out when we have grandkids, right? So basically, I need to first of all recognize a few people who are here, my cousins Susan and John Van Vliet, and also Steve Dorfman, one of our colleagues who has been, he doesn't really know, well, he's putting up a lot of money to build a building for the school of management, but his example in life and how he conducts himself has really been a kind of a mentorship thing for me, even though he doesn't know it. So I'm glad you're here to hear my the tale of my company and what we do, and also Jared Godinez, who worked at the Business Times for 11 years before he left us to strike out on his own just a couple of years ago. We didn't turn his hair gray in those 11 years, but he had 2 successful product launches of his own, right, while he was there. And also, I learned an awful lot, a tremendous amount, that I will never forget about UCSB volleyball. So and right. Oh, really? Okay. Well, anyway, so they're here, and I'm really delighted that they're here. I would say that I had 75 slides, but I boiled them down to this. So take copious notes, and there will be a quiz. The one thing we learn as journalists, we learn this very early, is that anytime somebody starts a PowerPoint, the next thing that happens is everybody checks their email. So see that? I'm already into this, and I haven't seen one person. Oh, there's one right there. Okay. The next thing you really need to know is that I started the Business Times really crazy. I'll talk a little bit about the Business Times. I'll talk a little bit about the evolution, as I see it, of the corporate culture of the Central Coast. I really think there is a distinct corporate culture here on the Central Coast. I'll talk a little bit about the transformations that I've seen, particularly post-recession, and then a little bit, just to get some questions going, about the entrepreneurial networks that have emerged and where I see some of the opportunities are in this. So we'll just dive right in. So I started the Business Times with a lease sob, a checkbook, and a business plan. The sob went I had 100,990 miles on it, and I assigned myself to drive to Ventura for a meeting. So I did a 101 on the 101. But it had a meeting with a guardrail at one point on the 101 in Summerlin and is no longer with us. But the checkbook is still using it. And from time to time, I do go back to the business plan to see what it is we are doing or not doing. I will tell you that very few business plans, like very few battle plans, survive their first test with reality. But there are some things that come through in a business plan that are important. And one of them is a sort of a corporate culture, how you're going to approach things. And we like to think of ourselves as professional and caring, or professional and kind. We really try to encourage our employees to put their families first after they've put in a 12 or 14-hour day. But we really do, and we think about community in a fairly generous way. If we think that something makes sense for our readership, our audience, and if we think it makes sense for us, and it requires some extra advertising commitment or media commitment, or we need to get somebody somewhere to help out with somebody's event, we'll do it if we possibly can. And we think that's really, really, really important. What you give is really kind of how you make your life, as Winston Churchill sort of said. So the Business Times is a weekly business journal. Place-based, we cover Ventura, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo counties, and if we feel like it, we'll slide down into the city of Westlake Village, about which there's some debate about whether that's actually part of the Central Coast or part of the evil empire of LA. And occasionally, even if there's a company a little further south that we like, that we think fits in with the Central Coast culture, we'll do some coverage there. But primarily, our focus is the 3 counties. We publish weekly. We publish every Friday. We are subscription-based. 80% of the copies that we print are paid for by somebody one way or the other. We have some affiliate relationships with the Chambers of Commerce, where corporate sponsors buy subscriptions for chamber members. We have a relationship with an economic development group in San Luis Obispo County, where all the sponsors of that organization get a subscription as part of that. We have this discipline about getting paid for our work, and we think that's really the way to go. Our website, www.pacbiztimes.com, is pretty heavily locked down for non-subscribers. Sorry about that, folks, but that's just the way it is. If you want a taste of what we do, you can go to our website, pacbiztimes.com, and there are a couple boxes where you can click and sign up for a free emails letter, which will get you breaking news alerts and notice about our events. We started publishing on March 17th of 2000, and you know, it happened to be St. Patrick's Day, but it also happened to be a month in which there were 5 Fridays, and I had made a commitment to start publishing by the end of the first quarter of 2000, and March had that extra week, so I figured if we missed by a week or even 2, we would actually still be within our parameter, but we actually hit the middle of the month, which was St. Patrick's Day. Curiously, Montecito Bank and Trust was also born on St. Patrick's Day, precisely 25 years before we got started. And on our 10th anniversary, I got a note from Mike Tobes, who was probably one of the most successful entrepreneurs, and maybe the most successful financial entrepreneur in second, maybe, in the history of the region. And it was like, how did 2 nice Jewish boys start their companies on St. Patrick's Day? Best wishes for continued success, Mike. So anyway, it was I framed it, what the heck. So we publish weekly, and we have an editorial calendar. We have a real discipline to what we do. Every issue has a top 25 list. It has a focus section. It has a financial section. It has an opinion section. We benefit greatly from contributions from some of the fine faculty at Cal Lutheran, including Vlad, in that section. And then on top of that, we publish 24 special reports, including the Central Coast Innovation Awards, where we're going to be honoring not just our company here, but also we're going to have a startup village in the afternoon where we're going to be presenting student entrepreneurs from Cal Lutheran, UC Santa Barbara, and Cal Poly, who will come and make their pitch to our audience, which also includes some financial types and professional services types. And so it's a real opportunity for student entrepreneurs to showcase their startups. We have a People's Choice Award. That's a real popular thing. So if you come, buy a ticket, come and vote for your favorite company, and hopefully they'll pick up some hardware. That Central Coast Innovation Awards is our first event of the year, and over the course of our 20 years, we've evolved to where we have 8 events. So we have Central Coast Innovation Awards, Top 50 Women in Business, which is held at the Deckers Brands Pavilion there in Goleta. They produce these boots called UGG that are very popular. It seems like a great partnership. And Wendy Yang, who actually runs everything but UGG, she runs Teva and Sanuk and this wildly successful sneaker called Hoka 11 is going to be our keynote. Our Business Hall of Fame winner this year, which is our next event, is Best Places to Work and Business Hall of Fame. Our Hall of Fame winner this year is Rick Stolmeyer, who, from San Luis Obispo, who started MindBody in a garage, built it to be a wildly successful company, took it public, and just sold it for $1.9 billion. After that, we have a program called Champions in Healthcare, which is a luncheon. We're talking this year. It's one of the very few places where the CEOs of the large healthcare organizations can network and talk and learn and share. And this year our topic, which is pretty timely, is disruption in healthcare. Healthcare is an industry that's being disrupted in scientifically, politically, from a public policy standpoint. And for those of you who followed companies like Theranos and this company that produced OxyContin, I mean, it's really a lot going on, crazy stuff in healthcare. 4 or 5 years ago, after talking at some length with the Hispanic community, we developed our Latino Business Awards. And I said to our publisher, Linda, if we can sell more than $2,000 worth of tickets, I'll start a scholarship fund. Well, we started a scholarship fund with $500. Then one of our winners said, well, can we make a donation? We said, fine. Then a couple of banks had some community reinvestment money. We said, okay. Now we have $15,000. So for the next 10 years, we're going to give a $1,000 scholarship every year. And Ventura County Community Foundation selects the winner. So it's kind of blind to us, but we're just there to hand out checks. And Greg was a winner last year. We go there. In 2013, we put together a partnership with the United States Small Business Administration on something called the Spirit of Small Business Awards. That's kind of one of our long established events. We're really excited about that, being now in its 16th or 17th year. 40 Under 40 was our very first event, and it's been so successful that both the San Luis Obispo Tribune and the Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce have stolen the idea. And we love them, but we wish they would not totally copycat us. And then we finish up our year with with an Oktoberfest that is also our 50 fastest growing companies. We think can find more than 50 this year, so I'm challenging my team to make it the 100 fastest growing companies. And that's at the Moxie Museum up in Santa Barbara. We do a beer tasting on the roof. But funny things happen to you when you're an entrepreneur, and you got to pay attention, you got to stay alert. But we had this event, this fastest growing companies event, at the Crown Plaza in Ventura, because we couldn't afford any other venue with the sponsorship we had. So, and it was like, okay. And then we gave an award to Figueroa Mountain Brewing Company. Well, Jamie Dieterhofer is on the stage, and he says, I really like this award, and I really like you guys, but you're killing me because the hotel is serving 805. Next year, the beer's on me. And I looked at him and I said, are you serious? He said, damn right, I'm serious. Well, what happened was they provided the beer. We found the Moxie Museum, which was way more affordable than a real fancy hotel, and the Moxie was thrilled. We made the economics work, and the event has just kind of blown up. So there's something about just putting it out there and being open to new ideas that can make things happen. So that's enough about the Business Times. We'd love for you to subscribe. We'd love for you to sponsor our events. We're heading into our 20th year. One thing we learned, now my role at the company is I'm sort of the chief content person. I'm the community relations person, hence this talk. And then I sort of run the corporation. And the thing about running the corporation is you just can't, I know entrepreneurialism is in some ways about scale, but it's also about reality. And one thing we've learned about our business is we can't easily outrun the economics of the region. And it's a relatively slow growth region. To put up 20, 40, 50% growth numbers is not particularly realistic, but growing at a pretty steady pace, 5 to 8% a year, allows you to grow. You don't have to go out and find capital. You don't have to find credit. You can fund your operation with cash and just take advantage of opportunities that come along. One innovation, one thing that we've done that's been pretty cool, in addition to a lot of work on the digital side, is we found this interest in sort of this pride of our region. Now I'm going to segue over to corporate history, but to a little bit more of the history of the corporate culture in the Tri-Counties. But we found these companies are really proud of their corporate history. And as they hit milestones, they like to produce publications. We're able to do it in ways that are relatively affordable. And they're not really like print 50 copies, send it to your family members and grandkids and a couple of customers, and then it goes away. We can print thousands of copies that become excellent sales and marketing pieces for companies. We've done 4. We've done Giordano's, the city of Ventura for their 150th, the Red Cross for their 100th, and then we just did Limonera. And now I will segue over and talk a little bit about the evolution of the corporate culture. This is a region that has been sort of knit together economically for a very long period of time. I like to, it's kind of 3 counties separated by a common economy is the way I put it. The politics have been very complicated, and there's lots of little fiefdoms. There's up the grade, below the grade, North Santa Barbara County, South Santa Barbara County, North San Luis Obispo, South San Luis Obispo County. The fact of the matter is, the only place where there's actually been litigation between municipalities was between Ventura and Oxnard over a mall. So the Santa Clara River, you might say, is the real defining barrier. But when I look back, when I look at history, I think about sort of the corporate history of the region. I think about kind of 3 things. One is the fact that dating back to the early days, Ventura and Santa Barbara were the same counties. There was Los Angeles County, there was Santa Barbara County, there was San Luis Obispo County, and there was Monterey County. Well, the only way to get from Ventura, which was really just a little tiny hamlet for a long time, and actually even when it became a city, the only way to get from Ventura to Santa Barbara was through a crossing of the riverbed of the Ventura River. This was an unsustainable situation if you were a lawyer trying to record a deed or trying to file a lawsuit, because the guys in Santa Barbara had a huge competitive advantage because they could file their paperwork and you might be stuck on the other side of the river, not able to cross for a couple of days. Well, you see what happened last night, a couple of days. So this was an unsustainable situation, and actually Ventura lobbied the legislature. It was one of very few counties that was broken off as a separate county. But when you look at what was going on economically, it's just like a mirror image. So imagine this. The year is 1879. Imagine, 1879. A stevedore brings ashore a plant from a ship that has come from Latin America. And a man who might be Henry Lewis, but we're not sure, walks up to him and says, "What do you call that?" Well, the stevedore didn't know how to pronounce it, and he said, "This is a lima bean." Well, the bean actually came from Lima, Peru. It was mispronounced. But it turned out, and this is where you learn about the region, we are very good at niche products. We're not big like LA. We weren't as big as LA back in the 1840s and 50s. San Francisco, of course, was nothing, and then they found gold, and it became the sort of the capital of the West. But the lima bean, it turns out, can be grown without any irrigation whatsoever in the coastal plain of California because the fog provides enough moisture to grow and sprout and grow the beans. The Santa Ana winds can be used to dry it. And what is now all of the coastal plain of Oxnard with those strawberries, everything on the other side of the mountains, most of West LA, was planted in lima beans at the turn of the 20th century. And it became such a huge crop that a merchant from Oxnard put together a train and took them to the Chicago Exposition, and it was named the Bean King. Crazy stuff. But you can see there's the same thing that's happening in Santa Barbara is happening in Ventura. Henry Lewis, the Lewis Road, Lewes, there near Cal State, the other university, is named after him. That was the kind of the epicenter of the lima bean industry. And it went on for a very long time. Third thing that is pretty common to the region that tells you a little bit about the culture is the creation of Limonera in Santa Paula in 1893, where several families got together to begin growing and harvesting citrus. And again, lima beans became a commodity crop, and then they moved all to the Midwest. Citrus has always been a coastal crop here. It's been, it's in our DNA. It takes a lot of people, it takes water, it takes quality control, because lemons are, in particular, are pretty precious commodities. So you began to evolve this culture where it's not quite the same as LA. In fact, businesses that start in the Central Coast sometimes move to LA, like the movie business. I think when it was in Santa Barbara and Ventura counties, the movie business was probably a little more collegial, a little more informal, a little more laid back. Now it's all run by the lawyers and the agents. But this culture of kind of a community-focused, place-based agriculture started, and then a second wave happened as industrialization began to come to the region. And so from maybe the 1940s until the 1980s, you have this, particularly after World War II, you have this industrial culture, defense economics. Steve's Hughes, all the component makers for aerospace, they moved out of LA, they moved to Ventura, camera makers, imagers. But again, you have this situation where you don't have a lot of land, you don't have a lot of housing, you can't build a company with thousands of people. There are a couple of exceptions, we'll get to them in a second. But most of the time you're operating with 400 or 500 people, and you can build a great niche company. That's what the region does really well. It does it over and over and over again. It keeps finding ways to do that. In the middle 1990s, something about that really changed. Actually, 2 or 3 things about that really changed. One of them related to here is that the biologists at Amgen started to produce in big quantities these biologic drugs. And they took a niche product that could have been a 400 or 500 person company and grew a really huge company. So big, in fact, that even the Amgen folks will say it's almost too big for this region because it dominated biotech in a way that didn't allow other companies to come up. And in economy 3.0, that's starting to change. The second one was Gene Haas moving his machine shop out of LA. That's such a unique company. I don't know how many of you know about Haas Automation? Okay, I don't need to tell you. It's the world's largest machine tool maker. It's the owner of the 30 car in NASCAR. They kill it now on Formula One racing in Europe. And it's a very unique company in manufacturing. Just one of those companies that is kind of a one in a million. The third thing that started to happen in the early 1990s was that UC Santa Barbara changed the way that it deals with its professors and their science. And I can't tell you how important that was, because I think the same thing was happening at UCLA at the same time, which may have impacted what Amgen was doing. But at UC Santa Barbara, before this, professors had to leave their jobs, then file their patents, then start their companies. Post 1993, roughly, they could keep their jobs, file their patents, and have a royalty agreement with the university and just build their companies. Take a leave of absence, not take a leave of absence, hire people, whatever they wanted to do, raise capital. As long as the university got paid, they didn't care. And what happened was that at about that same time, roughly somewhat similar to that, Henry Yang came in as chancellor, but more importantly, they had a dean of engineering named Venki, and I can't pronounce his last name, but he retired several years ago as dean of engineering at Harvard. And he and a group did a study, and they said, look, we will never compete with the Silicon Valley for silicon-based chips. But we have all these cool people doing really groovy stuff in material science. There's a lot of chips that have different properties, and we can work with something called compound semiconductors or hybrid semiconductors that use a material other than silicon to transmit electricity or energy through them. And since then, they've had amazing success in that area, in sensors, in cameras, in infrared detection. Steve probably knows more about the satellites using those than anybody else, but a lot of military uses, see-through fog, day for night, very fast processing chips that can be used in space defense, in all kinds of advanced weapons, and also in a lot of future-looking optics. You can use them, I mean, they're going to be important in self-driving cars and all kinds of things. And a great example of some of the synergy in the region is Teledyne, which was, up until the mid-90s, Rockwell Science Center, actually the mid-00s, it was owned by Rockwell. Rockwell sold to Teledyne. Bob Morabian, who was the CEO of Teledyne, moved out of LA, moved from Olympic Boulevard out to Thousand Oaks because he needed the pipeline of scientists and technology and innovation from UCLA and UCSB and Caltech to build Teledyne into what it is today. I'm a little bit off track, but that compound semiconductors is a huge deal. We now have at UCSB about a quarter to a third of all the LED light bulbs used in the world use a technology produced by a transplant from Japan who showed up. And there are many other examples. The second thing that happened, and this is the thing that survived the dot-com, because the dot-com was sort of a weird anomaly and it created a lot of paper value, and of course we all know what happened. But underneath that, people began to think about software. And people who think about software typically are smart people. And they don't need a lot of facilities, but they need inspiration, and they can make a lot of money. And so if you're smart, you're making a lot of money, and you need cool places for inspiration, guess where you find it? Well, Santa Barbara, Ventura, San Luis Obispo. These are great places for software entrepreneurship. And some of it happened by happenstance. Some of it happened because a woman named Pam Lopker graduated from UCSB. She liked the code. Her husband was starting a shoe company called Deckers. They needed some software, so she built some software for them, and now they have this big worldwide enterprise software company. But there are many, many other examples of software companies in the region. And I would lump sort of the internet advertising people like the Trade Desk into the software field. So this is a big change. This is a very, very, very significant change. Software is now sort of the engine that drives a lot of innovation in the region. MindBody is a software company for yoga studios and spas. And you never know where software is going to lead. I will give you an example. Somebody was playing around with search software. That never went too well. Then they played around with graphic design software. That didn't go too well. Then they started to play around with voice recognition software. And just as they were about ready to run out of capital, Amazon came around and bought them. And the company was called Graphique. It's now part of Amazon, and their software is running a lot of the search backbone for Alexa. And they're about ready to take over the former Saks Fifth Avenue building in downtown Santa Barbara. Amazon has another node in San Luis Obispo with about 130 people. And they never talk except when the mayor, they have this enthusiastic, energetic millennial mayor who suggested after the New York HQ2 deal blew up that people should boycott Amazon. And Amazon gently reminded her that, that their workforce of 130 people was, generating more value for the city than, in the fire department, the police department, and Anyway, it's been a funny little exchange. But software and compound semiconductors will take you a very long way. The challenges are obvious. We don't have a huge venture capital community. We don't have a lot of land to build on. But we have smart people who like to be here and grow companies. And that's kind of the corporate culture that we have. And it's very, very interesting. I will talk a little bit about a couple of transitions. One, which I see as a big challenge, and I'm not sure what the answer is. The other I see as a big opportunity, potentially a game-changing opportunity. The challenge is, when I started the Business Times, and for a very, very, very long time, the financial services scene, for companies that could get to be, now look, if you're a startup, a raw startup, you're going to have to bootstrap your capital, you're going to have to find angel financing, or give up 90% of your company to the VCs. That's just life. But for traditional companies like Cal's company, a construction company, an insurance company, you have clients, you have profits, you have something you can take to the bank. My cousins have a very successful consulting business. And for a long time, banking in the region was sort of relied very heavily on fixed place-based lenders who were deep in the community. From the late 1800s, from the early 1900s, late 1800s, until 1970s or so, 1980s, there was a big bank in Ventura County. It was called the Bank of A. Levy. It was the same guy who was the Bean King, had a bank, and it survived the Depression and was a big commercial lender. Santa Barbara had Santa Barbara Bank and Trust, and then in San Luis Obispo County, they had Midstate Bank and Trust. All three banks knew each other. They all competed against each other to a certain extent, but they also recognized each other's dominance in those counties. And when I started the Business Times in 2000, Ventura County was a bit up for grabs, but Santa Barbara County was dominated by Santa Barbara Bank and Trust, and San Luis Obispo was dominated by Midstate. And today, that scene has really changed. And we had about 25 other, there was just a strata of place-based banks, you know, big banks, middle banks, little banks. Today, we're down to what I call the final four. There are 4 banks left in the Tri-Counties that are actually based here. The largest is Montecito Bank and Trust. Then you have 2 kind of middle-sized ones, American Riviera and Community West, and then a very small bank in Santa Maria called Community Bank of Santa Maria. There's no bank based in Ventura County anymore. We have large regional banks based in typically Orange County. They're much bigger. They have more flexibility. They have more capital. They can do different things, but they don't have the place-based banking that we saw before the financial crisis. And the financial crisis really kind of wiped that slate clean, which is really a remarkable change if you think about it. If you were a mid-state bank shareholder, I congratulate you because that was one of the best deals ever in banking. And if you were a Santa Barbara Bank and Trust shareholder, you get my condolences because that was a 92% wipeout of the equity. That's the big change. And the big challenge is how does the financial system operate for the next 100 years in our region when so little of it is sort of based here, because the new rules on banking are going to allow for almost unlimited mergers among what we call the regional 5. It's March Madness, Pacific Coast business time style, because you have Citizens Business Bank, Pac West, Pac Premier, Bank of Sierra, and then, you know, pick one more. They're all California based. They all are fairly big, but the ability of their managements to merge is pretty much unlimited. They could all merge together and form one big bank, and the regulators wouldn't care. And they wouldn't face any limits because the new capital limits are like 50 billion and 250 billion, and those banks are all under 40. Okay, enough of my rant about banking. Housing is the big opportunity. You know, it's a very interesting time. We did a 100-year history, 150-year history for the city of Ventura. And what we discovered was that Ventura, the city of Ventura's population had been growing at like 2.5% from the beginning of time, literally, to 1993, 4, 5, whenever the SOAR initiative got put in. And once housing restrictions stopped, the population growth fell to about 1/2%. And something similar happened in Santa Barbara. So as these growth restrictions come in and housing stops being built, population growth pretty much comes to a halt. And what's happening now is that there are some forces that are driving toward a resurgence in home construction for the region. The governor is pushing hard at it. Some local governments are starting to see the benefits of trying to provide housing for a new generation of employees or for the kids of the current generation. Thirdly, I think if you're really smart, which not all elected officials are, but if you're really smart and you're an elected official, you begin to realize 2 things. 1, I have a pension problem. 2, the reason why I have a pension problem is that my public employees are addicted to having nice houses, and they keep demanding more and more pay in order to be able to afford their houses, and the pension costs keep going crazy. So I think what you're going to see, and we saw it in the California Supreme Court very preliminary way this week, is some reform on pensions, some move by the governor and forward-thinking local governments to build some more housing. And I am cautiously, very cautiously optimistic that we might see some change in the way we think about housing and home construction. I must say that, before I move on to talk about networks, there is a little eye-opening thing if you think about Ventura County, and I was part of a group that County CEO Mike Powers put together an economic strategy for the county. And we thought about Ventura counties, and we had the typical consultant, blah, blah, blah. And you think about what makes Ventura County Ventura County. Well, it's great schools, it's single-family homes, and it's the fact that you go to work in Thousand Oaks or Santa Barbara or LA, and you come over the hill and you come home to your house and you're home, and it's quiet, but you commute. So what are the things that the millennial generation wants? Well, they don't want a house, they don't want to commute, and they want to live where they work and they shop. And so the only place in Ventura County that actually does that is River Park. And River Park is going bonkers right now. Who would have thought? And everything else is a bit of a struggle. Downtown Ventura, it isn't quite enough of a live-work-play place, but it's getting there. Thousand Oaks has kind of woke to the fact that it's not right, and some of the stuff on T.O. Boulevard looks kind of interesting, but Ventura County was built as a baby boomer heaven, and it doesn't work anymore. So it's a real eye-opener. Now, I want to move on, because I promised Vlad I would talk about opportunities and networks. I think I've talked a lot about opportunities. Software, compound semiconductors, if you can find anything there that works, ride it. I do think there are some networks worth talking about. This is a really interesting network operation that Mike and Greg have, and it's really very effective, and it's bringing more diversity of entrepreneurship to the Conejo Valley. It comes at a time when Amgen is really trying hard to encourage some of the technology that doesn't quite fit with its game plan to spin off, and we've seen the beginnings of a real bioscience revolution in the Conejo Valley. That's great, and those are some things that are really good themes for you all to think about. There are some interesting organizations. There is an MIT Enterprise Forum chapter, the smallest one that there is in Santa Barbara, that meets once a month, and there's some interesting informal networks as well. They also have a technology management program that has begun to inculcate entrepreneurial activity. And then in San Luis Obispo, at Cal Poly, one of the big revolutions in this post-recession era is the president of Cal Poly has said, hey, we're going to move our entire entrepreneurial effort into the city. And they have built a massive incubator called the Hot House, which is both for students but also open to the community. They have some very interesting technology in sensors, particularly water detection, water measurement, in other types of measurement. They don't have PhD at Cal Poly, but they are very attractive to sort of what I would call the middle market of technology. And they've spun off some pretty successful enterprises. Not as successful as Hub 101, but they're getting there. And so I do think there are some interesting networks that are popping up and down the region, which are going to make the entrepreneurial culture a bit more sustainable. I remember back in 2004, 2005, there was a group of students from Cal Poly who all decided to start businesses. One started a moving company, one started a brewery, one started a fitness center. And they've done pretty well, but the new generation is much better networked and much more capable. They'll probably wind up, with much different types of companies going forward. So with that, Vlad, how are we for time? So we'll open it up to Q&A.
Yes, let's do that. Thank you very much, Henry.
There's a question right here.
Yes. 1 sec.
Oh.
Thank you, Henry.
Thank you.
We have some time for question and answers. I know, Naomi, you're number one, for sure. We have a second microphone there, and
I have a loud voice.
no, it's okay. We need to.
We need to,
Is Women's Economic Venture, WEAVE, doing a lot for entrepreneurship and the community?
that's a really good question. The answer to that is yes, and we're very fortunate. Had I thought through it a little bit more, Women's Economic Ventures is one of those very unique programs that Marsha Bailey, who founded WEAVE, is a pioneer in micro lending and also training of women entrepreneurs, but she also trains women and men. And she saw the light. She started in Santa Barbara. She saw the light. She brought her operation to Ventura County, and we've recognized a lot of entrepreneurs who are WEAVE graduates over the years. That's a really great point. I would say that Women's Economic Ventures is responsible for a lot of the revitalization going on in Ventura right now, because they've just been very good at finding women who can retail and set up stores, and it's a really important thing. I think Marsha, it probably doesn't get as much credit as is due, and people don't turn to her when there are problems like downtown Santa Barbara has had this terrible retail disruption, and I think it's only beginning to dawn on the city that they can tap resources like WEAVE for even pop-up stores or temporary stores or even displays to help make the city better and generate sales. Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good point.
You're serving 3 counties right now, business times.
Right.
For the benefit of entrepreneurs, what to you is the economic standing of the 3 counties for now? And down the line, 5 years from now, how do you see understanding the socioeconomic development plan of each county? How do you see it change in the next 5 years? Which one will be the most economically progressive out of the 3?
That's a good question. Well, forecasts by definition are always wrong, but I'll take a stab. Right now, all 3 counties are in reasonably good shape. Unemployment is at or around or below 4%. GDP is growing and has been growing. And there's been this curious phenomenon where as the country was coming out, the recession for all 3 counties was really deep. And as the country was coming out, we were lagging. But I think even the Lutheran economists' data shows that actually California has been performing, and the tri-counties are not that much different. We've been performing at or maybe a little above the national trend. San Luis Obispo County is really small. And so one project, one thing, one company doing a lot of hiring can really change the dynamics. But the one thing about San Luis that makes me think they could outperform is that they're much more diversified. They used to be a real estate-driven economy. Now tech is much bigger, and they're much closer to the Silicon Valley. About Santa Barbara County, I described them the way Winston Churchill described the Americans. You can always count on Santa Barbara to do the right thing after it's exhausted all the alternatives. So you know, Santa Barbara County slept while San Luis Obispo became a bigger wine growing region. It sort of disrespected its State Street, and it's had some struggles there. But, you know, it is a global tourism destination. It has UC Santa Barbara, and I think it will probably turn in a pretty average performance. I worry a little bit about Ventura County because it is heavily dependent on Amgen in the East County. And, you know, I think the management at Amgen right now is as smart as it's been. But as mergers in biotech and bioscience get bigger and bigger and bigger, you know, you got to either attack or be eaten. And I'm cautiously optimistic that Amgen can continue to survive. That headquarters being here is a huge reputational benefit to the region and to Cal Lutheran, even if they don't, even if they're not as philanthropic, their CEO isn't particularly visible in the area, but it's still a big hunk of the economy. San Luis Obispo has a problem because they have a nuclear power plant up there called Diablo Canyon, and it's going to close in 10 years, or 8 years, but 8 years is a long ways away, so we'll see. I would say, I think Ventura County, if it can build housing and continue to attract tech, could surprise on the upside. Santa Barbara is going to be what it's going to be. And San Luis Obispo, I think, probably has the better opportunity just because it's small. But it has the question mark around Diablo Canyon, so. Long answer to it.
We have another question over here.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. This has been really helpful hearing about all the different things going on in the area. I'm an attorney, and my clients, I'm on the transactional side. My clients are mainly in the retail space and nowhere in the area. They're out in the city of industry, commerce. The closest is Santa Monica. And I was looking at, hopefully this year, getting clients out in this area, and I was thinking, you mentioned a lot of organizations, but do you recommend any, particularly for my space, to join, and if I'm looking for growth and connecting with clients in that area?
Well, I think one of the things that, and we've been doing some reporting on this, there are some fields where women have really progressed up the ranks in work and in gaining acceptance in what has always been and continues to be to a certain extent an old boy network. And the law and banking are two areas where women are really making a lot of strides. I think there are some really top-notch women in the Bar Association who you might just talk to and meet with and connect with. You may find some complementariness, so you're not, competing head to head. Are you representing mainly retail clients, or are they industrial commercial clients, or?
I represent Smart and Final, the grocery store chain.
Oh, okay.
Topic, Torrid, real estate company out in Santa Monica called Douglas Emmett. So mainly retail, and I'd like to focus on retail, but I'm open to
Gotcha.
on the transactional side. So.
Gotcha. There's a lot of specialty retailers, more than you would think, just kind of floating around. We keep running into them all the time. One of the things about the companies that are in retail on the Central Coast is that they tend to be very socially conscious. B corporations, and I think if you kind of networked around, there isn't really a big retail council, but I could help you connect with a couple people. Actually, talk to Clarice Clark at Lee & Associates. Call her up in Santa Barbara. She knows a lot about retail. And even though commercial real estate is really old boy network, two of the best people in retail are women. Clarice Clark at Lee and Linda Hagelis, who I think is on her own. She and her husband work together, but she's at Radius Group. Thank you, Jared. Commission, ka-ching.
We've got another question
He sold
over
ads
here.
for us,
Hi, my name is Henry, CLU alumni, 2000. I would like to hear something about your comment on the retirement community, okay? Because all these years when I'm on this part of the state, I realized, like Santa Barbara, St. Louis Obispo has always been, people want to move to, eventually when they retire. So, and also my second question is that in your economic times, is there any section covering the aging population and the economic impact on, the overall of the Tri-County?
Interesting. In one of the papers, there's a big story about elder financial abuse, which is a huge problem and a growing problem in the region. I think, you know, when you think about entrepreneurship, which was the focus of this talk, there certainly are some people who are older who like to fund, mentor, be part of angel networks, and there are a number of angel networks that are pretty well established that you can, in every community, you can find them. In fact, our Central Coast Innovation, Spirit of Innovation winner, which is kind of our capstone award, is going to a woman named Joanne Miller from, who has an angel venture capital kind of company called Brown Dog Partners. And so I see the elderly population as a great source of capital and skills and knowledge to transfer. It's kind of interesting, the SCORE chapters around here, and I think part of this, I mean, I hate to say it, but you know, part of the problem of our political climate right now is that SCORE is part of the SBA is part of the Trump administration. Maybe some people like that, maybe some people don't. It gets very complicated. But we've had a very active SCORE chapter here in Ventura County, and that's a great place where retired people, elderly people can contribute. When we don't have something like the tech and entrepreneur revolution right now driving the economy, when we're stuck in the doldrums, there was a lot of talk about the tri-counties, or particularly Santa Barbara and parts of Ventura County, simply being, you know, sort of giant communities of old people who spend their money on luxury cars and hospital bills. But, and certainly the healthcare field has gotten very large. We've had a lot going on in healthcare in terms of construction and facilities, and Ventura County is a very dominant, is a very complicated, disaggregated market. But that's the topic for a different talk. But yes, it's a big factor.
I have a question for you, Henry. Is Trade Desk going to continue to grow in Ventura? And what are your thoughts on the city of Ventura's new city manager who came from Menlo Park, is it?
Yes, and I don't know. No, I think, I do think the Trade Desk has a big commitment to Ventura. I wouldn't be surprised to see them grow in the Santa Barbara area as well. And I think the new city manager, some of the more interesting people right now are the city manager in Thousand Oaks, the city manager in Ventura, the city manager in Oxnard, and the whole group of them in San Luis Obispo.
Westlake Village just got a new city manager from Palo Alto.
Oh, really?
So it seems like they're making their move south.
Uh-oh, here we
Right.
come.
Right. And we have time for one more question.
My cousin. Oh, well, two more.
I just wanted to say that one opportunity is right here in front of us, Cal Lutheran. There's a great opportunity for a lot of entrepreneurs and business people to help push this university forward. And I'm happy to be sitting here next to Steve Dorfman, who has committed $6 million to a new building here at CLU. So there's a lot of things that are going on, and we can encourage our friends and other people that are not in the community yet to get involved.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I'm not.
And I would say Cal Lutheran is a great example of a niche, of an organization that has found its niche, understands its niche, and benefits from having people like Steve sort of come along and say, hey, I can see that, and I want to play. So.
Okay, so yes, first of all, I want to say I think having just moved here 3.5 years ago and just getting involved with Cal Lutheran, especially for you back there, the lawyer who is wanting to network, it's probably a good place for you to begin to network. And all of these programs, if you can attend them, are also very good places to network and meet people. So it's really, I think it provides a network.
It has been great.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And then my question is, Do you see businesses moving from LA County to Ventura and south? Because we seem to be seeing a lot of people who are moving their companies further south, both in the entertainment industry and in other industries as well.
This is part of the dilemma that I was talking about. Oh, okay. Well, part of the dilemma that you have with Ventura County right now is this very thing where you could set your watch going back to the 80s and 90s and early 00s by the number of companies leaving, Reseda, Tarzana, Encino. It's all kind of a blur, Burbank, Glendale, maybe all the way out to Pasadena and Pomona, and coming over the hill and finding Nirvana, because they were baby boomer companies. And Chatsworth, although there's some questions, parts of Chatsworth are actually in Ventura County. But anyway, coming over the hill and setting up shop here. And we didn't see that for a while. We're starting to see a little bit of that now. But at the same time, the cross current is that when you get to a certain size, now California has backfilled all these other cities, Denver, Austin, even Las Vegas, and we see people moving away. My own theory is that a strong LA economy is very good for Ventura County because people are prosperous, they get aspirational. Thousand Oaks, Camarillo, they look pretty good and they move out. A weak economy like we saw under Villaraigosa is not great for Ventura County because prices go down, unemployment goes high, it's cheaper to do business in LA, so coming out to Ventura is a little more of a stretch. But that's purely a theory, untested by anyone except punditry. So anyway, thank you all very much.
It was a wonderful evening. Thank you, Henry. I would like to thank also, again, Steve Dorfman, whose name, by the way, you will see in about 2.5 years on the new School of Management building. Thank you to Carl Johnson for coming. Thank you to all of you for coming over, and I'll see you again on April 3rd. Have a good evening. Good night.
And I'll see you at Central Coast Innovation Awards, March 28th, 14th of July. I hope so. Yes.